If you don't already think like this, and you watch this entire video, and you start making your decisions based on this graph that I'm going to show you, this video will completely change your life. If even for the next month, you just start to try to make decisions based on this graph, you'll start to realize, like, man, I should be making my decisions like this forever. And if it doesn't work for the next month, fine. Don't watch any of my videos. But I really think this video can change your life. All right, let's get into it. So on this graph, you can see that I have the quality of life that's in your control on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. This is not happiness. This is quality of life that's in your control. Because there's so many things that we can't control. Like terrible things can happen to us and we have no control over it. What we want to focus on is the things that we do have control over. Now, I have 3 lines on this graph. This green one, as you can see, is the sustainable best version of you. This is what people say when they say, become the best version of yourself. This is this green line. Now, the sustainable best version of you is based on things you can control. And I want to really emphasize that this is the sustainable best version of you. This isn't some Gary V work 18 hours a day and never sleep and give up all your friends. We want to do the things that keep us mentally healthy so that we can feel good about ourselves throughout our entire lives. And that doesn't mean you have to work 18 hours a day. Maybe that is right for you, but most people would like to at least get 8 hours of sleep. That's different for everyone, but we want to prioritize healthy habits like sleep because then we can make more sustainable changes. Okay, so this blue line is feeling like you're doing a good job generally. And lastly, the line that we want to avoid is this red line, hating yourself. Now, I've included this line because I do think it's important to consider that if we make really bad decisions, then we can fall below this red line. I really think that the best way to look at life is through these 3 lines. To understand that there's a line where you'll hate yourself, you'll feel really good about yourself, or you become the best version of yourself. It's not like an all or nothing kind of thing where you end up on one of these 3 lines. Most people end up somewhere in the middle. But I think it's really beneficial to have this understanding that this green line is who you truly are. Like this is your destiny. In the best case scenario, that's who you're supposed to be. And I know that's tough to think through because, that means that if we made any mistakes in our lives, that we're not this best version of ourselves. But no one actually hits this best version of themselves. Our goal is to get as close to it as we possibly can without trying to change the past because we can't control it. I think it's really beneficial to have this mindset that this is who we're supposed to be and our decisions should be everything that gets us as close to that as we can. That's how identity plays a pretty big part in your life. Because if you have this idea that I'm supposed to be this best version of myself, I'm supposed to be able to put myself out there, I'm supposed to not let fear hold me back from doing the things that I actually want to do, then you'll be way more likely to start making decisions that'll provide you that meaning in your life. So I think this is such a good way to look at life. You probably haven't seen my full Overcoming Anxiety guide, but in that I tell some very personal stories about my childhood and how it shaped kind of my identity of who I was for a little bit. It wasn't until that I addressed those issues and then started to rethink of like who I truly am and started considering this green line of being who I truly was that I started to make decisions that got me a little bit closer towards that. And obviously I'm far from this sustainable best version of myself because like I mentioned, no one hits it. I'm going to be honest with you, there was a time period where I was down on this red line and it's not a place you want to be. And now that I'm generally above the blue line and aiming towards that green line, I want to help as many people as possible. The amazing thing of thinking like this is quality of life that's in your control. So that means you don't have to be tied to the results. Like I posted an hour-long video. It's a full Overcoming Anxiety guide where I say like the most personal stories of my entire life. I spent maybe 40 hours on that video. I read 2 books. I started writing a lot, practiced my speaking, and I still have a lot to learn when it comes to speaking, storytelling, but I put a lot of effort into that. And at this point, it has 30 views. Because I've reframed my thinking to think more like this, I'm not like, oh, I need the results right now. Because bro, we can't force anyone to watch our videos, to take our advice, to do anything. But we can control just becoming the best version of ourselves. So I think this is such a powerful mindset to have. And later in the video, I'll mention many things that I think are absolutely fundamental to bringing us up on this graph. The nice thing about this graph is you can plot out anyone's life on this, like any person who's ever lived. You can look at their decisions and be like, okay, did this person actually try to make things better, in which case they'd probably be closer to this green line, or make things worse, in which case they would probably be closer to this red line. Okay, so we're going to plot out the life of a fictional character. We're going to call him Jim. Now, Jim starts at age 0, like the rest of us. As you can see, as a kid here, your decisions, they don't have that big of an impact, right? Because if you mess up, it's pretty easy to get back on track. Something important, though, is your habits can carry you a long time from your childhood. That being said, it's pretty easy to bounce back if you make a bad decision as a kid. We'll say Jim loves playing basketball. That's his favorite thing in the world. So he's playing so much basketball as a kid, and he's loving life. He's doing all the right things. He's eating his vegetables. Then he gets to age 18. Now, once you're at age 18, you can see that your decisions have much more of an impact. You making the wrong decision at age 2, as long as you bounce back, is not going to impact you as much as you making wrong decisions at age 18. So once you're at age 18, now you're not all potential. Like back here, you were literally all potential. You could be all the way up here. You could be down here. We don't know. It's dependent on your decisions. Obviously, when you turn 18, it's not like everything changes, but this general period of becoming an adult, now your decisions, they start to matter a lot more. So when Jim's 18, even though he loves playing basketball, he stops playing basketball because he gets kind of lazy and he finds new friends that really just want to like play video games all the time or watch Netflix. And he's like, oh, I'm feeling pretty good about myself, so I could just like kind of coast here. Well, then he can fall below this blue line of feeling like he's doing a generally good job. Do you see how just sitting around and doing nothing, it actually brings you down because time is passing. Like your conscience knows that time is passing. So if you just sit around and do nothing, then you'll fall below this blue line. And if you sit around long enough, you might fall below this red line, which is something we really want to avoid. I'm not saying that you need to do these things to make a bunch of money or status. That's not the goal here. The goal is to find what's meaningful to you and pursue that, because that's how you feel good about yourself. That's how you find this sustainable best version of you. It's finding what's meaningful to you. And it's going to be multiple things. It's going to be friends, family, some sort of purposeful job or career, and some hobbies that you really love. Now, let's say Jim's actually doing a great job. He's playing basketball. He actually wants to be a sports reporter. Like this is his passion. He's doing all the right things. Then he gets to age 25 and he goes out with his college buddies. They have like 6-7 drinks. And he's like, you know what? I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I think I can drive home. And he gets a DUI. Do you see how this one event could just take him completely off course? We really want to avoid dumb events like this. Now, of course, it is possible to bounce back from this. Like maybe he starts doing all the right things and he's able to get above this red line and back above this blue line. But this is really difficult. So we want to avoid making the dumb mistake in the first place. We don't want to have to fall down here to bounce back. Even though it is possible to bounce back, we don't want to put ourselves in this position. You might be feeling a little upset that you're not this green version of you. Well, no one hits this. Like no one becomes this sustainable best version of you. So don't beat yourself up if you're currently below this green line, because everyone is. Every single person in the world. There's not a single person alive today who's made every perfect decision their entire lives. This does exist, but it's nearly impossible to hit. But some people, they beat themselves up about it. They're like, I should have been up here and therefore I'm not going to do anything. But those people do nothing and they fall below this blue line. One of the main things I like to stress in this video is don't do nothing, because then time will be wasted and you won't feel good about yourself. The distance between where we are right now and the best version of ourselves is our mistakes. So here, I've just put mistakes, don't beat yourself up. Because beating yourself up about these mistakes, it's not helpful, because you can't change the past. You can't look back at your life and be like, oh, I wish I started playing basketball when I was 2 years old instead of 10 years old because I'd be way better. That's not helpful, because you can't change that. So don't beat yourself up for the mistakes. Just try and focus on becoming as close to this best version of yourself as you can. And again, no one hits this, so there's no point in beating yourself up. The only thing you could do is try and take the right steps to move towards it. So in this fictional scenario, let's say Jim, he's doing pretty well. He doesn't beat himself up, and he's making really good progress. And now he gets up to here. Well, he's going to look back at his life and be pretty happy about the decisions he's made because he's above this blue line. And he could look back at his life and be like, you know what, I made some pretty good decisions and I'm grateful for that. So that is actually helpful. Gratitude is actually super important. So what is gratitude on this graph? So, well, gratitude is the distance between where you are right now and how bad things could be. I'm sure that everyone watching this video has problems that they have to deal with, but I do think that having some level of gratitude is helpful, because you could look back at your life and be like, you know, I made some mistakes, but I definitely did some things right as well. Now that we have this plotted out, that there's a line that you become the best version of yourself and we want to be as close to this as we can be, well, the things that bring us up are acting in our values. And I'll name some values here. First and foremost, truth. So why would truth help us here? Truth is how we know where we are in this graph, what this green line looks like, what this red line looks like in real life. It's how we determine everything. So we have to be able to tell the truth, and we have to create a habit of it, even having tough conversations with people. Let's say Jim, he starts to say like, oh, actually, I am the best version of myself. Yeah, even though I'm here, I'm up here. Yeah, no, this is me. Well, what's he gonna do? He's gonna be like, oh, actually, I don't need to do that much. I'm already the best version of myself. Why don't I just sit around? Well, he thinks he's up here, but in reality, he's here. He sits around, and then he falls below this blue line. Now he starts to get closer to this red line, and maybe things get worse, and maybe he falls below it. So we don't want to lie to ourselves. We want to be very honest with ourselves in terms of where we are in this graph, what the best version of ourselves looks like, what the worst version of ourselves looks like, because that's how we know up from down, where we are, where we're going. It's how we know everything. It's by telling the truth. So what else brings us up? Well, purpose and hope. If you really feel like you have a purpose in life and that you're here to actually accomplish something, then you have an idea of what this green line looks like. And you have hope that you can achieve it. So the person who believes in purpose and hope is going to do way better than the person who sits around and does nothing, or the person who tries to make things worse. It's good to have some sort of purpose and hope. So the opposite of these things are the things that will actually bring us down: lies and nihilism. So what else brings us up? Well, how about having a good family? Because now it's not just you that you care about. It's your parents, your kids, whoever's part of your family. If other people are reliant on your actions, you're way more likely to start taking your decisions seriously. In the same way, loneliness will bring us down. So it's important to surround yourself with good friends, good family members, people who genuinely want what's best for you. Okay, courage and believing in yourself. So the person who believes in himself is way more likely to accomplish the goal than the person who doesn't. Because the person who's believing in themselves, they're at this point thinking, yeah, you know what, actually this green line, it exists, and I think I could reach it. So they start to do the right things, and they start to move upwards. The person who doesn't believe in themselves, the person who acts in fear and self-doubt, again, they're the ones who just sit around and do nothing. And of course you're going to make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. Everyone makes mistakes. It's just recognizing that you need to be able to believe in yourself. Even if you're at the point where you feel like, oh man, I wasted a lot of time in my life, and I feel like, oh, I didn't believe in myself, so like, what's the point now? Well, you can still turn things around, right? If you start to make really good progress, then you can get back above this blue line and get as close to the green line as you can. And I really want to emphasize that this is based on your actions, not your feelings. A lot of people, they get this confused. This graph is about your actions. If you let your fear or your self-doubt win a lot of your decisions, then you're more likely to feel that more intensely the next time. But you can feel the sensations of fear and self-doubt and still act in a way that's in congruence with who you want to be. Your emotions don't have to drive your decisions. This is not based on your emotions. Everyone feels fear. Everyone feels self-doubt. And sometimes you'll act in fear. Sometimes you'll act in self-doubt. But it's important to just acknowledge that the goal is to not act in fear or self-doubt. And that even when you feel fear or self-doubt, you don't have to follow it. And don't overwhelm yourself with this. Like, just focus on trying to get 1% better each day. I really think that's the best way to make progress. Because the person who's sitting here thinking, man, I can't skip over up to the green line, like I might as well just sit around and do nothing, will not make progress. The person who's like, okay, I can get 1% better, that person starts to get forward momentum, and that's the person who makes progress. So don't beat yourself up if you're like making mistakes, acting in fear, self-doubt. Just try and make as much progress as you can. I can't emphasize this enough. No one hits this green line. We just want to get as close to it as we can. We don't want to beat ourselves up for our mistakes in the past. We just want to learn from them. Like I mentioned, because you feel fear doesn't mean you have to act in it. And that is the skill of discipline. Discipline is doing something difficult even when you don't feel like doing it. So there'll be times in your life where you're going to have to make tough decisions, you're going to have tough conversations, and you'll feel that fear, you'll feel that self-doubt, but you know it's the right thing to do. Still do it despite how you feel. I'm telling you, when I had panic attacks, the way I was able to overcome it was just by focusing on trying to get a little better each day and being as disciplined as I could. Like, I knew I felt terrible, but I knew that the decisions that I had to make had to be based on the person I wanted to be, not how I was feeling in the moment. So discipline is really important. And the opposite of discipline is laziness, just sitting around, not really doing anything. So two other things that'll lift you up are presence and humility. Presence is really just paying attention to the specific moment you're in. Because when you're in that specific moment, there's usually a good decision you can make and a bad decision you can make. Presence is being aware of that. It's paying attention in the moment. Because when people aren't present, they're thinking of different time periods, right? They're thinking of either the past, the future. They're thinking things like, man, when I was 18, I shouldn't have said you too to the waiter. So then they become less aware of their decisions and they kind of just sit around. And humility is just understanding that there's never a time to just coast in life, because you could always have a more meaningful life. Like, your meaningful decisions, there's usually a lot of tough conversations and decisions to make within that. So humility is understanding that this game is forever. We're playing this game till we die. So there will be some tough times. So it's important not to just sit around and be like, oh, you know what? I'm above this blue line, so I don't have to do anything. That's not the right way to think. The opposite of presence is distraction or overconsumption. I included overconsumption here because I do think it's good to take a step back from social media, video games, TV, just these modern addictions that are just in our face all the time. I think it could distract us from making the right decisions. I'm not saying to never use any of these. I'm just saying be mindful of it. Be mindful of the time you're spending on these things that you could be spending doing something that's more meaningful to you. Like in this case for Jim, he loves basketball. Maybe it's playing basketball. Maybe it's like studying to be a reporter. Whatever it is, make sure you're spending more time on the things that are more meaningful to you than the things that are distracting you. Next up, we have focusing on doing what is best for you and others despite what haters think. So I do think it's important to consider what other people think. Just you got to make sure it's the right people. If you're doing something truly valuable, like some people will hate on it. That's just something that you have to accept. In terms of like trying to become the best version of yourself, some people will judge you. But if you're focused on doing what's best for you and others, and you don't let anyone's hate take you off course, then you'll make good progress. I think a lot of people, myself included previously, they get stuck too much on thinking what other people will think. You just need to focus on doing what's best for you and others based on what you think. You shouldn't worry what people who aren't even rooting for you think of you, because they're not rooting for you. Like, why consider their opinions if they're not the ones who are rooting for you? They're not the ones who actually genuinely want to see you succeed. If you're trying to do something positive in your life, then who cares what they think? And I know it's difficult. I'm not trying to minimize this and say, oh, it's super easy to overcome people's opinions. It's pretty difficult. But you have to consider the alternative. The alternative is living this life where you slowly make bad decisions for you that you don't find meaningful. Then you fall below the blue line. Then you'd blame the people whose opinions really controlled your actions. But in reality, you could have acted the way you wanted despite those people's opinions. Okay, aiming upwards. For the rest of these, I'll just focus on the things that bring us up without going through all the opposites and just talk through each one. Aiming upwards. So wherever we are on this graph, we always want to make sure we're aiming upwards, because sometimes bad things happen and you'll feel an instinct to aim downwards. Maybe you feel vengeful to someone who wronged you in high school, who said something racist to you. I promise you that being vengeful is not going to help your life. Now, I'm not saying to let everything go. I think that you should speak up for yourself in situations where that's necessary. And I do believe in justice, but make sure you're always aiming upwards, because acting out of hate, even revenge, it will make things worse for you yourself. I'm gonna go through these last few pretty quick. All right, inspirational people. Okay, obviously you wanna surround yourself with people who inspire you. You don't wanna be around people who are actually rooting against you. Like, be around people who actually wanna do great things, who wanna root for you, who are really inspirational to you. And help the people who have those aspirations but are struggling to accomplish them. Because those people are also really inspiring, like the people who haven't really accomplished much, but they want to learn and they're humble. It doesn't have to be someone who's like super successful that can inspire you. Like sometimes I'm inspired by my nephew. He's 2 years old and he thinks he's a superhero and he's like throwing kicks and punches. It's really inspiring to see him have this confidence of thinking, you know what, I'm a superhero, even though he's 2 years old. That still inspires me. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, these extremely successful millionaires or whatever. Just find inspiration in the people around you who are well-intentioned. Positive momentum. So like I mentioned, momentum is really important here, especially as a kid. It's even more important, you know, the younger you are, the more important it is, because if you create good habits as a child, you could be way up here for the rest of your life if you just continue doing it, because your habits make up so much of your life. Like if you really want to change your life, you should change your habits, because once you start doing healthy habits, things get easier. If you're like, oh man, maybe I should start making my bed, then you're like, yeah, you know what, actually, I gained some confidence from that. Now let me start going to the gym. Oh, actually, I want to read more. Oh, actually, I want to put myself out there on the internet. So these like small decisions, they point you in the right direction. And once you see that you're going in the right direction, it becomes easier to keep going that way. Now, the opposite is also true. Like negative momentum can take you downwards. Like the more negative decisions you make, the harder it is to bounce back. Taking it one step at a time. You want to be like, oh, I know I'm not up here, but I'm not at the bottom. Even if you're like way down here, you could still have some level of gratitude to be like, okay, I'm not at the bottom. Things could get worse, but I can aim upwards. And if I take it one step at a time, then I can make progress and I can start to feel good about myself. And that's the goal. Even when you're down here, even when you're at your lowest point, when you're thinking, man, I should be all the way up here. Don't beat yourself up, because it's not going to be helpful. You'll sit around and you'll stay, and this distance will become larger. What you want to do is focus on getting 1% better and improving every day, because then you can get above this line. People underestimate the power of taking it one step at a time. If you get 1% better every day, you become 37 times better by the end of the year. Not 37%, 3,700%. That is insane. You can essentially become a totally new person. So even when you're down here, you can get above this line. You just need to focus on getting 1% better and being very consistent with that. And don't beat yourself up if you make mistakes. No one's life is perfect. No one's life just turns it around. It's always going to be some zigzags, ups and downs. Don't beat yourself up. Just try and focus on taking it one step at a time. And lastly, choosing your regrets. So I heard this on a Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozi podcast. But basically in life, you get to choose your regret. There's no such thing as having no regrets. So you'll always have those what if thoughts because you don't know. You don't know what your life would have looked like if you made decision A instead of decision B. But you get to choose your regrets. Like right now in the moment, you get to choose which one you regret. You get to choose what career you want, what kind of friends you want, what relationship to pursue. But you'll always have some level of regret. You'll always think of the what if, but follow your gut and make the best choice at the moment. I know I make a lot of anxiety content, and follow your gut is bad advice for anxious people. If you have anxiety, follow your goals. And again, I want to emphasize this is quality of life that's in your control. Like some things are going to be out of our control, but if we just focus on the things that are in our control, we focus on getting 1% better and becoming the best version of ourselves to the extent that we can, then things will get better. I really believe that. And I know it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult to become this best version of yourself. It will be probably the most difficult thing you would do in your life because it is your life. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I am saying it's going to be worth it. Life's not easy, but it's worth it. Take care.